Okay, peace. How's everybody doing? How's everybody doing out there in Cyberland? So, what I'm gonna talk about now is foods, right? This is point one. This is the first step in the plan to get out of the problems and get into the solutions. Okay. So, just a little bit about me, right? I think somebody told me once that sugar was, and I read it a few times, but they was talking about how sugar is more addictive than cocaine. And I mean, when they told me that, man, I was just like, and every time I read it, I just always felt like that was, and addiction or rather addictive substances, I guess, can be subjective. Sometimes, it might be based on. I mean, for me to say, oh, it's more addictive than cocaine or more addictive than nicotine or something like that. It could just be something that goes on with me, right? Or somebody else. Basically, it's subjective, But here lately, I've come to the conclusion that sugar is very addictive, but that's something that I'm gonna get back to, right? We're gonna get back to that, and this is not gonna be a long video. I don't have a lot of time anyway, but foods, basically what we eat, is important, but I think what's more important is how we eat, and that's what I'm gonna talk about. I got some material here. Our body chemistry. I think that it's important, first of all, in order to understand how important the frequency at which we eat is you should take in account what goes on inside your system. Okay, now our body chemistry, man, it's like we all have this miraculous, this complicated system going on inside of us, man. And it's powerful, strong. You got, your stomach acid can break down metals. I was surprised finding that out. But it's a very, very complex system. And it's volatile. Okay. And so, that volatile state, that acid, those burning, I mean, it's controlled. Maybe volatile might not be the best word for it because it's controlled by the immune system. However, at the same time, what's going on in there is serious. You know what I'm saying? And so when we feel those hunger pains, you feel that bubbling, you hear that bubbling, your stomach growling, and you feel those hunger pains, and you think, I've got to put something in there. That's not necessarily the truth. It's just that you got some serious processing going on inside of you. And it has to be that way, because, I mean, you think about it, if I was to give you an orange and tell you break this orange down on a molecular level into the things, into different compounds and elements that makes it up, I mean, where would you start? Your body does this on a sometimes constant basis, And so while we're eating, a lot of us, we think that every time that stomach growls, every time we feel that hunger, we're supposed to put something in there. What's happening is you constantly working the stomach. You're constantly working this digestive tract. And it's working, and it's equipped to handle it, especially when we're young. But what ends up happening, as we get older, a lot of us who are older, we know that, we begin to develop all of these health issues, right? You know, and that's where most of them come from. Most of our health issues, whether it's high blood pressure, whether it's cholesterol poisoning, gout, kidney disease, liver disease, all of these things that you know are big killers. You know, heart disease that are big killers. You know, number one causes of death could be fixed by changing how we eat. You know, they talk a lot about, and that's something I want to get into too. We talk a lot about focusing on, they want to focus so much on what you're eating. But what I find interesting is that it's a lot of old people, man, this, you know, 90s, hundreds of years old, man, and they don't go to Whole Food stores. They don't watch their diet the way some of us do that are younger. They don't even know how. You know, they eat chitlin and hog maw, pig feet. You know, some of them drink alcohol, even smoke on a regular basis. But I think that what it is that the further along you go, especially my generation and on, we have this abundance mindset when it comes to eating. And so a lot of us are overeaters, and we eat and we eat and we eat constantly. And the reason why those bad foods don't affect the older generations the way they affect us is because they moderate. You know, they don't eat as much. You know, they come from a different time when there wasn't this much convenience. There was no DoorDash. There was no Walmart. You know, some of these older people, they make food from scratch. And so when they eat, you see what I'm saying, it's not as frequent as some of us do, you know. And so that plays a big role because it's not just your digestive tract that's getting overworked by this process, but it's also your immune system. See, upwards of 70% of your immune system's job goes on in the gut. Why? Because that's the place that you're constantly introducing foreign objects and foreign substances to your body. So everything that comes into the body, the immune system has to make sure it's processed. It has to make sure it's filed. They need to make sure the things that are good for you, that's going to give you energy, is here, and the things that is going to harm you is going to be put over here in the waste category. And then on top of probably 1,001 different other things that the immune system has to do. Scientists, doctors don't even have the human body all figured out yet. It's all kinds of things going on in there. But what this boils down to is it boils down to energy, right? Now, we think that we're eating to get energy. You think when you get up in the morning, they tell you breakfast is the most important meal of the day. You need to eat to get energy. But I want to let you know that is marketing. You know, that doesn't necessarily have scientific basis towards it. Yes, food, we do get our energy from food, but you do not get energy instantly after you eat. And if you notice, I mean, that's not really hard to figure out. What happens when you eat that big breakfast or when you eat that big meal? You get sluggish, you full, you tired, right? I think my granddad used to tell me on the job it's better to be half hungry than all the way full, right? Many of us know this, okay? And that's because when you eat a meal, that food has to be processed. It has to be metabolized and turned into energy. And so we look at a lot of us, especially here in America, we look at us, most of us were obese. We don't even know what obesity is, most of us. A lot of us are morbidly obese. We're extra obese. And it turns into these health conditions. And it's why it's because we're overeating. All right, but by the time that food is metabolized and the energy is extracted from it, it's more than what we need, and so it turns into fat. You know, and that's why many of us, we can stand to miss a few meals. But let me tell you, with the 10 points of recovery and why foods is the first point in the process is because when you learn to train yourself, when you learn to tame that stomach and begin to ignore those hunger pains, okay, and realize this, the body will manufacture pain in order to get you to do something to please yourself, in order to get euphoria. Because we get euphoria from eating, right? That food that makes us feel good. And so it's important to understand that the body will manufacture pain, will manufacture things like headaches, and you feeling like, oh, I gotta eat something just so you can get that euphoria, right? So when you tame that, when you learn to tame that, you learn to control those hunger pangs, okay? And you get to a point where you don't have to constantly reach for food. You don't have to constantly reach for something to eat. You realize, you understand that hunger pains are not a sign of terminal illness. What will begin to happen is that energy that used to go to the processing of foods, that energy that your immune system used to take up and keeping you alive, processing all these toxins and various chemicals and food in the foods that you continuously eat. When you give your stomach a rest, when you give your immune system a rest, that energy can now go to other things. Other things like what? Like thought, like creativity, like building, taking that next step towards the things that you really want. Now, once we do that, in comes another a big issue, because a lot of us focus our attention on things that just take us further away from what we truly want in life. And I mean, it's all kinds of things. We got these friends, we got these gangs, we got these clubs, we got these people that are just acquaintances who we allow to say things, we allow to do things, we engage with them, and what happens is they take our energy, they take our time, they call it renting space, right? You know, you heard people say, don't let people rent space in your head. Well, the 10 points is about how to do that. How to not let people rent space in your head. And it's not, I'm not saying, okay, don't listen to them. Just quit thinking about it. Because that's an impossibility. You know? How do you not think about something by thinking about it? They say just stop thinking about it, okay? Or you try, but you just thought about it. Then you tell yourself, I gotta stop thinking about this. How are you going to do that? Well, there's ways. There are definitely ways. Just like you have to process that food that you eat. You think about it. When you overeat, you eat too much, or you eat something. You go to one of these restaurants, you eat a taco or something else that doesn't agree with you, gives you the upset stomach. What do we have to do? We got to process that, right? Well, it works the same way with these thoughts and these ideas. We have to learn how to process them and get through them, not just not think about it, because that doesn't work for us, does it? Okay, so it's also important to know this. It's a fact that I talk about in 10 Points of Recovery. The brain and the stomach actually have a connection. The brain and the stomach are connected. New research is showing that the stomach controls how we feel. The stomach is what tells the brain what mood or how to feel about things in terms of your mood, by your mood. So, you know, a lot of times when you upset, you feel some type of way, or sad, you hurt, nightmares, those nightmares that we have, right? Is based on what's going on in the stomach. You know, and so when we learn how to eat, when we learn how to regulate what's going on in the gut, it's the first step to energy production, but it's also the first step to making us feel better. You know, Dr. Robert Gundry, author of The Energy Paradox, says that we can actually draw more energy in a fasted state. So, you know, that's a good book. That's a decent book. Actually changed my perception on eating, changed the way I look at eating. You know, of course, he tries to sell some stuff. He turns into a hustler midway through the book, but, you know. But yeah, so if we learn how to eat, you know. So what I do is I have a time limit, you know. I don't eat all day and all night. I have a window. I normally don't eat my first meal till 12 o'clock. And I give myself 3 hours after my last meal. Now, this is what I'm going to get to when I started with sugar. Because, somebody told me before a few times that sugar was more addictive than cocaine. But see, I had never tried to stop eating sugar. You know, I think I've been I've loved chocolate my whole life. I've never really thought about the sweets that I eat. And I think when I first started this program, when I first started 10 Points of Recovery, I was really, really watching what I was eating. I was looking at lectins, and I think I gave up sugar. For the most part, I didn't even give up fruit. But then I kind of, slid back into it, and I wasn't really thinking, I wasn't really counting how many times I would eat sugar. And that contributed to some health issues, And so what I did eventually is I started watching my sugar intake. And man, it's hard. Think about it. But before you can get to that point, what you're going to have to do first is you're going to have to start regulating what you eat. You're going to have to start counting. And I'm not saying that you can't eat what you like. That's not my program, telling people what to eat. But what I'm saying is don't eat it all the time. Give your stomach a rest. Give your digestive system a rest sometimes. Your immune system also. Give it a rest. Give it a time to clean up and get everything squared away. But when you do eat, like when I eat, I get full. I eat what I like. But that sugar, right? It's definitely a hard thing to get rid of. And one of the biggest lies that they tell us is that sugar gives this energy rush. Sugar does not give an energy rush. What you get when you eat that sugar is you get euphoria. And you get a spike in it. But sugar also drains you. Sugar also drains you. And it causes a lot of other issues. It causes kidney problems. Kidney disease is a leading cause of death. And the sad part is a lot of us don't even know that we have it. You need to ask your doctor. You need to talk to your doctor about your blood work. Don't be afraid to get into what's going on inside your body because, that kidney disease, it kills. I think it's like number 2 or 3. It's up there when it comes to leading causes of death. And that sugar wreaks havoc. And they put it in everything. And that's a big thing too, man. We gotta watch. We gotta pay attention to these ideas that we take in because a lot of them do not work for us. They working for other people. They working for everybody but us. One of them is things like breakfast is the most important meal of the day. That's a lie. Not paying attention to your sugar intake. and thinking that it's okay to eat all these sugary breakfast foods and all this stuff. It's killing you, you know. Thinking that you need 3 meals a day. No, you don't. You know. The human body can go up to 28 days without food. Why do you think you need to eat constantly throughout the day? You know. That's why you're gassy all the time. You know. Irritable bowel syndrome and all these different kinds of things. It's killing us. It's killing you. So that's definitely something to pay attention to. And what I'm going to do is, man, is I'm going to come back and I'm going to do another video on release. You know, the same way that we have to process these foods that we eat. We have to process these thoughts, ideas, and these feelings that we have, because at the end of the day, nobody's going to do it for us. You know, we can talk all day long about bullying, people bullying the children, and we could talk about Black Lives Matter and hands up, don't shoot, and Asian hate and hatred against women and hatred against all these different types of groups. But the fact of the matter is, people are not going to change. You know, and so it's about how we deal and how can I heal self, and process these thoughts, feelings, emotions, and put myself in the position so that I can get closer to what I want. Right? So that's 10 points of recovery. Check the page, hit the like button, follow, and I'll come back shortly with another video on release.